Briefly, the focus shifted. Expansion of contacts, operations, and personnel had been the goal of the Payday gang for some time now, but in this moment, none of that mattered. This was something understood and accepted by all, not even the calculating dentist could alter this path. Hoxton would have his revenge. Of course, for all parties, having someone linked to CrimeNet alive and in police custody posed a risk worth squashing. But even if the dentist could have organised the Golden Grin hit the following day, he knew it would have to wait. With Hoxton, payback for payback's sake came first. Of course, how all this played out would have wide-ranging implications both for the gang and the law enforcement tasked with halting them. This is the story of Payday. At last, the server had given up its most crucial secret. The informant was being held in an undercover FBI safehouse that could be pinpointed to specific GPS coordinates. Seeing that the police were not unaware of his involvement, the dentist was more than willing to pass this information on free of charge, and Bain was even comfortable paying out of pocket for the rat's head and the recovery of any intel on CrimeNet. None of this was really necessary. Hoxton would have done it all for free, so without the need for any encouragement, he and those in the inner circle of the Payday project headed over rapidly to the address outside the city. More by circumstance than good planning, the gang entered the remote safehouse at the dead of night. Armed with the intel Bonnie provided, they intended to get in, slit the betrayer's throat, and get out without detection. The four breached the compound fence into an understated but sizable suburban residence. Spy drones were set up by one of Bain's police contacts to help with casing and intel. As expected, this was a house that had been repurposed for witness protection as not to draw any unwanted attention. Quickly, it became apparent that Bonnie's intel was spot on. The house was fully alarmed, but a quick case of the building revealed the gaps in its security. A delayed response system on the alert mechanism designed to avoid false alarms from the movements of guarding personnel meant a rapid entrance could gag the alarm system before it had the chance to ring out. Similarly, they spotted an open balcony with the same laser detection security they'd encountered during their first hit on the National Gallery. This was another weak point in the FBI's defences. Entrance wasn't difficult. Neither was finding the panic room, which had served as the rat's entire world once the server went missing. To open this vault, 2 keycards and a live retinal scan from the FBI boss was required. The keycards were located around the building, obviously laid discarded between guard rotations. It also didn't take them long to find the FBI boss, who took little persuading to place his face in front of the scanner once he recognised the dreaded clown mask he'd been pursuing. With that, the informant's sanctuary was breached, and his life was in the Payday gang's hands. A 1-minute time lock counted down his remaining seconds. As the lock on the door decompressed and drew back, there he was, the backstabbing traitor, the one who'd seen to Hoxton's imprisonment and seemingly aimed to disrupt CrimeNet ever since. His identity was... Now, hang on a minute. At this point, the gang didn't need to see his face to know his identity. Hoxton had been listening to his voice echoing through the vault door for the last minute, laced with a distinctive Colombian accent. However, it was unfamiliar to him, having never dealt with the man before. On the other hand, his crewmates knew this target well. While searching for the panic room keycards, at Bain's behest, the others had set about dismantling the case the FBI had on them. Glancing over these evidence boards gave Dallas all he needed to decipher who was in that panic room. First, seeing the CrimeNet Connections pinboard, it was notable that the cops had amusingly little on Vlad. Something was not right there. But more revealingly, one contractor was conspicuous in their absence. Digging deeper, it became easy to see why. Operation Watchdog was the next piece of evidence the gang came across. At a glance, it was clear that the botched coke smuggling run at the docks was not a result of great detective work, but was in fact a setup. The police encirclement and pursuit was part and parcel to this double operation. And just who had contracted this mission with the gang? It was Hector. Rats, Firestarter, the pieces came together all too easy. The police had arrived at that secluded forest location surprisingly quickly, hadn't they? And what about the Mendoza airport raid? A similar lightning response time. Not to mention sending the gang into federal headquarters unprepared, then demanding a recording of their crimes in progress. Not only was Hector attempting to orchestrate the gang's apprehension, he was helping to create a case against them. After all that, him breaking communication now made a lot more sense. It wouldn't have taken much more for Bain to deduce who was disrupting operations if he'd kept probing at the gang. Hector hadn't gone in hiding from the police, he was in hiding from CrimeNet. In any case, it was clear that his contracts had all been part of an elaborate ruse. Hector was the rat, and now he was a cornered one.
Hector, we're running out of time. I've prepared a safe house. We'll keep you protected while you work with my agents to build a case against the clowns. From what I've learned about them over the months, I'd say your life depends on it. Lotus.
Of course, there'd been many clues, and if Hoxton were a patient man, he would have taken the time to decipher them before garroting the man who'd seen him locked away for 2 years. But he was not a patient man. It hardly mattered to him who the traitor was. All that mattered was he was still breathing, and shortly he wouldn't be.
There are so many stupid criminals in the world that to be smart is a relatively easy thing. It only takes deliberation, where most would choose action.
Hoxton saw to Hector quite brutally once the vault door swung open, over 2 years of resentment bleeding through his knife thrusts. Hox took his helmet as a souvenir and joined up with the rest of the gang to tear the safe house apart. Once enough damage had been done to the integrity of the FBI's clown case, the crew escaped as they arrived, loading all the evidence needed for their prosecution into the back of the van. Dallas's intuition told him to also secure 6 tape recordings of Hector's interrogation, concerned that his betrayal may have been part of a more major counter-criminal operation. Once back at the safe house, Bane was able to comb through these tapes and work out just what Hector had revealed and a timeline for his double cross. To summarise on his backstabbing, as we know, Hector began his involvement with Bane after the Payday gang's legendary second hit on the First World Bank, Overdrill, becoming a fence for the Mayan gold that the crew stole. It lines up that here is where his ambition outstripped his capabilities. Moving $72 million worth of gold comes with its perils, and it seems that in the process of fencing it, Hector found himself in DC police custody. However, despite his years of cartel and drug smuggling operations, he was only a facilitator, not the mastermind or the muscle behind the largest wave of organised crime the US had ever seen. Those in the clown case saw that anyone with links to Mr. Trust's fortune must also have had their hand in CrimeNet, and therefore probably had some access to Bane. So even as a high-profile arrest, Hector was seen as a much more useful police asset than simply a state prisoner. As such, he was given a choice: indefinite incarceration or cooperation with the police, with the goal to arrest the Payday gang in his stead. Begrudgingly, Hector agreed, owing no real loyalty to Bane or the gang, but understanding the price of criminal betrayal. When Hector was first pressured to aid in the arrest of the gang, he bought himself time by offering up just one of the members, the betrayal Hoxton was so fixated on. All evidence suggests that he and Dallas were in hiding together after Overdrill, and that Hector was aware of this location due to being part of Bane's post-Overdrill plans. All of this points to Hoxton being arrested specifically as Hector refused to give up Dallas, giving Dallas a chance to escape the police raid and, as the dentist reminds him, leaving Hoxton to his fate.
How did it feel, leaving him behind?
Hector's later Payday 2 jobs were all a product of increased police pressure to go after the rest of the gang, in the guise of aiding his cartel operations. I personally wonder whether Hector was just being pragmatic here, or genuinely understood his likely fate after he'd seen what the gang was capable of in Watch Dogs, using our crew while he could to tie up loose ends before his inevitable fate. After Hoxton was freed and the raid on the FBI headquarters took place, Hector was forced into police protection and essentially left to wait for his 4 horsemen to arrive. The book seemed to stop at Hector. All other contacts were under suspicion themselves, so Bane could rest easy knowing that the FBI were absolutely on the back foot. This wouldn't always be the case, but for now, the Payday gang had the upper hand and could return to growing their empire. Right on time, in fact, as Vlad needed a favour. Again, the details were vague, but at least he made it clear that the target location was the very same Murky Water warehouse they'd hit for Gage during Shadow Raid. Messing with the Murkies always felt a little off, and worryingly this time, Vlad demanded more of an aggressive approach, given the crew had to move fast to catch his quarry before it went into transit. This may as well have been an outright declaration of war against the Murky Water mercenaries, or private security company as they went by officially. But Vlad was paying unusually well, and seeing as the police were starting from scratch with the clown case, now was the time to make bold moves. Familiar with the area, the gang took to a nearby rooftop to zipline straight into the heart of the compound. The on-site mercs tried to defend the warehouse alone, but the blitzkrieg approach of the Payday gang was too much for the skeleton crew to repel, and unsurprisingly, the gunfire prompted a civilian in earshot to call the cops. Pretty notable that the Murkies resisted calling for police assistance, and not for the first time. They must have been hiding a wealth of conflict spoils they didn't want the law sniffing around. Either way, they didn't have much choice in the matter, as the forces responded quickly, desperate to rebuild their case. Meanwhile, the crew on the ground were following Vlad's instructions, prizing open the freight containers in the search of a portable vault. After they found it, Vlad finally gave a little more information, suggesting they jam crowbars into the vault's cooling fans to force the temperature-regulated vault to open. I suppose when faced with technology like that, the best approach is a brute force one. Worryingly, a vault that operated on a temperature-controlled system likely only contained one thing. This time, Vlad had the gang handling live nukes. 8 of them, to be precise, sealed in radiation-proof containers that were accessible once the vault had its emergency unlock mechanism activated. An impressive departure for Vlad. From stealing tiaras and smashing up malls, it now seemed like he was doing business with an entire country. Which country Vlad intended to sell to was unknown, although he heavily implied the warheads would be heading to Europe, maybe not far from his own homeland. Bane was furious that Vlad again had put his crew in immense danger without fair warning, but they were far too committed to refuse at this point. Vlad may not have had the dentist knack for preparation when approaching a heist, but for once he had made sure the gang was well supplied, as compound forklifts were readily available to help move the immensely heavy loot. In fact, he even left the crew a gift. Well, at least he made sure the crew would be able to steal a gift from the Murkies, directing them to the rear end of the courtyard where their first means of escape was stored, the Longfellow. Apparently, this classic muscle car once belonged to Muammar al-Gaddafi, showing just how impressive and wide-reaching Murky Water's illegal seizures really were. Their level of militant opportunism was impressive, somehow acquiring a prized possession of Colonel Gaddafi likely after the company involved themselves in his deposition. Murky Water was a dangerous enemy to have. In any case, this sort of powerhouse vehicle was just what they needed to speed the warheads to the exfiltration point, a train Vlad had compromised to get the gang out of murky territory in the nearby rail yard. During the escape, the cops show glimpses of their post-revenge resolve, sending out multiple sniper teams and turret-mounted vehicles to intercept and block the Longfellow's progress over the half-kilometre exfil route. After 2 perilous trips through the yard, all 8 of the warheads were delivered to the open carriage, and seeing as the gang were able to create some distance between them and the cops, they were able to leave with the train without pursuit. At least Vlad was paying danger money. This wouldn't be the last of his schemes, but for now, it was Bane's turn to share a job he'd been working on. He was planning a statement heist, one that would show the public of Washington just how inevitable the Payday gang was becoming, how bold they could afford to be after dismantling the police case against them, and embarrassing the premium security company Gensec while they were at it. The idea of a crime of such scale taking place while the nearby public went on enjoying themselves regardless had the sort of poetic implication that would etch itself into the minds of the populace once it became news the following day. Remember, Bane wasn't just about getting rich. He wanted to elicit some sort of change in how America operated, and by showing that while law enforcement failed to protect its assets, nearby civilians were able to carry on oblivious to it all, Bane had just the message of protector incompetence he was looking for, using the fame of world-renowned DJ Alesso to make the heist even more of a headliner. The Alesso heist was a one-off opportunity, taking place at the Gensec Arena, the last destination for Alesso's East Coast tour. Gensec's bravado meant that the stadium wasn't just a top-of-the-line music venue, it also doubled as a major vault for the company, a flagship of the security company's hubris. But the dual purpose of the location also proved to be its downfall. The plan required the stealthing expertise of the likes of Clover and Houston, but also the demolition skills Wolf brought to the table. The crux being that the volume and ground-shaking bass of Alesso's performance meant that explosives could be used without breaking stealth. The heist also hinged on an insider within Gensec, likely the same guy who tipped Bane off on the interception points for the armoured transports a year prior. This insider hid C4 plastic explosive within storage cabinets connected to refreshment stores, which the gang could recover once through stadium security. This C4 was then planted on the underside of the vaults before heading up to the pyrotechnic booth to ensure Alesso's performance was tailored to mask the explosions. Taking out the console operator, the crew did his job for him, timing the pyrotechnics to their own detonations, not only putting on a great show, but also gaining access to the vaults. As Alesso's final song winded down, the aptly titled Payday, all gang members returned to the delivery room beneath the vault using specifically designed circular cutters to extract the plastic-wrapped cash bundles. These bags were then moved into the vent system of the building, with Bane's insider set to collect them once the stadium was vacated. The gang innovated by using store chutes to move the bags more rapidly to the pre-designated closet, From here, the inside man took over, instructing the members to clean down and mask off for their blended escape within the masses of crowds leaving the gig. Partygoers in sharp suits may be suspicious, but the sheer volume of those exiting the concert made this an easy escape. The FBI files note just how cocky a move this was by Bain, the likes of which would be tough to replicate if the rumours of planned personnel changes at the top of the Washington police hierarchy were to go through. A worrying thought for the Payday gang, but one they'd have little time to think about. The dentist was calling. Vegas awaited, and the golden grin was open for the Payday gang. One final piece of the puzzle was required for the dentist's plan to work though, a new heister with one specific talent.